I think what I did was I hit the wrong button. That's what I did. There's two buttons. One's a pause button and one's a stop button. And so when it was paused the last time.
Oh, you push stop?
Yeah. But it is currently recording.
I see it. Yep, I see it.
Okay, so we both can pay attention to that.
Okay.
And if you, and I'll cut all this out, but if you see the blip at all again.
Oh, then I can look up there. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Got you.
Okay. Take her away.
Hi, I'm Katie.
And I'm Janine. Welcome to this episode of Girls Just Want to Tell Stories. In this episode, we're talking about what to do when a friend is experiencing a difficult situation in their life and how to be a supportive friend. This might include, losing a job. It might include, a relationship breaking up. And it may very well include loss, that is the death of a friend or a family member. So we are tackling some big subjects today and hope to share our stories to help you when you find yourself in the place of either needing a friend or being a friend that can be supportive.
Yes, not easy to talk about. As we, before this taping, had said, sometimes the universe presents an opportunity, and unfortunately, we received some, devastating news about a very dear friend of ours before the taping of our second episode. And we pushed through and we taped. And then later that week, I was speaking to a friend who's in our circle, and she said, Katie, it's authentic, and maybe you should have talked about that because we're all, really going through a very heavy time. Mm-hmm. And I appreciated that. And she's right. And we want our show to resonate with our listeners. And we can't do that if we're always sugarcoating or trying to make things always seem like happy, because there are times in life when things get a little heavy. And prior to this episode, I did a little research because, for myself personally and, culturally, we are afraid of death. We don't talk about death. We avoid the discussion. And over the past century, according to Psychology Today, Death American Style, death and sex have been battling it out for the #1 spot of the unmentionables in America. And how sad that death is now the #1 unmentionable topic, or forbidden quotient, as they said. And additionally, looking at our culture and death, I discovered that it wasn't until after the Civil War that there became a real need for the undertaker. And that position took from the families. Families used to prepare the bodies for death and or the embalming, which I'm not sure even what that means, but they would prepare the bodies. And actually, you'll have to check me if I'm wrong, my listeners, but I think that the living room initially was a viewing room. Like the body would be in the living room and people would come and pay their last respects. And that's why the living room was created. Interestingly.
Yeah.
But by having an undertaker, right, it removes us from that nitty-gritty process. And I think in that we became more fearful. Death became a negative subject. People began to brood about it. And really, we all know going in that that's going to be the eventuality. So I don't know why we don't talk about it more openly and share our, what we want, share our wishes with our friends and our families.
And I think particularly in Western culture, this is an issue. And I know our experiences are unique as kids growing up. So being from an Italian Catholic family, we were closer to the process of death. I know now a lot of people they'll tell me as adults they've never been to a funeral or, and I think before I hit my high school graduation, I had been to, a half a dozen, because the tradition and the culture of our family was to honor that person and their life, and that kids did not have to be sheltered from that because it is a part of the life cycle. And so I attended all of my great grandparents' that were living when I was alive, those funerals. And then I was really fortunate that my grandparents all lived to be of advanced age. And so I was in my 30s and 40s when I was attending their funerals. And actually my son attended, some of those funerals as well. So that was my experience. And so I feel like it's presented itself in a very close way to in later stages where I've lost my dad, and my ex-husband has passed away. So my son has lost his father. And I don't know, I have to think that our reactions to those deaths were maybe different than someone who had been sheltered by it, who hadn't had a family that talked about it, or that their religion or their culture didn't kind of recognize that stage of life, right? And what
Right.
comes later.
Well, and I think you're very fortunate in that fact. As I was 12 years old when my namesake, Granny Katie, died, and my family was like, "Oh my God, kids don't go to a funeral, keep the kids away." And I remember at 12 thinking, well, this is BS. I was named after her. She was very important to me. Why don't I get to go and to this process and say my goodbyes and celebrate her life? She was very, very important to me. And I'll never forget that feeling as a kid, like, well, we can't go. Well, why? Our feelings don't matter. Our emotions are less than an adult. It was very odd. It was very odd.
And then
I
that can
think
really set you up to fear something that is, like you were saying, a natural part of life. As I was thinking about this topic, I really, thought back to some of my training as a yoga instructor. And one of the lessons that really stuck out with me in the Buddhist tradition is the fact that we suffer because we are attached, right? Sometimes to material things, but also to a way of life or relationships. And that attachment is what causes our suffering, because nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanent. We are all always evolving, changing in some way, and things do end. And when we can come to a place of acceptance with that, we can find more peace. And I know, in lots of conversations I'm having with people, we're looking for some of that peace. And that's one way to maybe kind of adjust our mindset. And what that leads to is an elevated sense of being present with what is now, right?
Yes.
Who knows next week if we'd be able to do this podcast. Something could happen. So we have to be here and be in the now and be present with people. And when people are suffering, when they are having a difficult time, that is, I think, one of the greatest gifts that we can provide is being present with people, right? Showing up for them, and looking them in the eye and saying, hey, I'm here for you. Because I think one of the things we've talked about is it's hard to know what to say sometimes when someone is in pain and clearly in need of support. And so we wanted to talk today with you all about what's helpful in these situations to maybe offer somebody.
Well, and I found it interesting just in doing, just research, why are we so afraid of death, the American culture? And one article quoted, death and dying is a very un-American experience, which I thought was funny. But, this whole, cowboy up and individualistic, I'm going to take it on, I can do all of these things. And one thing that I've been very guilty of saying to people that I've known who've gotten a diagnosis with cancer is, you got this, you're going to fight it, and maybe that's my way of saying, oh God, I personally am having an issue processing this information. So I'm going to just charge into this cheerleading mode. And instead of just really, as you were just saying, be present, take it in, and just be real and allow them the space to share what they need to share. A really good friend of ours who's in our circle is having some really challenging times, and she's actually really opened my eyes to things that are cringeworthy, like the "you got this," versus being able to say, oh wow, it seems like you're having a hard time, hang in there, I believe in you, I'm here for you. how is it that I can help you today?
Yeah. I know I've turned to Brene Brown's work. We admire her work
Yes.
in
Love Brene.
looking at vulnerability and shame and so much about relationships. And I really had looked at her work around empathy, and people even understand the difference between sympathy and empathy, and empathy really being feeling with people.
Yes, I love that. Feeling with people.
Right. And, our tendency is to want to make it better. And whether you're like us, the consummate cheerleader and wanting to cheer people on, or even if you're not the person that sees the glass half full, we still want to make it better for people when we can. And that's not possible always. And in fact, one of my favorite phrases that Brene shares is to say to somebody, when you don't know what to say that exact thing to say. Geez, I really don't know what to say, but I'm so glad you told me. Tell me more.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that opens that door to that space you were talking about for people to share with you and to help give a little bit of Brene's. This is her kind of model around empathy. First, you want to listen to take in that perspective. Where is this person? What are they feeling? Right? Because it's not. We can't place ourselves in the situation and think, well, this is how I would feel. We need to know, what are they feeling? And we need to suspend our judgment around whatever that might be, because maybe that's not the way we would have reacted. And then we need to help them understand and recognize the emotion by using questions. You seem frustrated. Tell me if that's the case, or how are you feeling? And really not shying away and avoiding the emotions in the situation by trying to make it feel better, but to allow the space to name it and to claim it. And when a person can do that, when a person feeling these emotions can do that, they can find a little bit of relief and move through the emotion. And maybe not in that moment, but it's part of the healing process, I think, to help people understand. Because the grief, when we're grieving, there are lots of different emotions, right? There is sadness, but there is anger, and there are a lot of emotions. And so where you might catch a friend can be very different from what you might have expected in that moment. And when Brene talks about shame too, and sometimes people actually, move into shame around how they're feeling, because maybe I'm feeling angry about the fact that my, dad was taken when he was in his early 60s, but I need to sit with that. And as my friend, you need to sit with me in that.
Yes.
You need to feel that emotion.
No, I love that, to sit with you. Well, another dear friend who just lost her mother to cancer, when her mother was just going into hospice care, we had been texting back and forth. I'm in Florida, she's in California, and I was looking at my phone one morning having my coffee, and I realized, oh shoot, I never answered her. So I try to be cognizant of the time difference, but I thought I'm just going to text her and then she can call me when she gets up or whatever. And I texted her, just, I'm thinking about you. I'm sorry I didn't reach back out. And then she called me. It was 4:30 in the morning, California time. And she called me and she said, I'm having insomnia. I'm really upset. I'm really sad. And she really had this burst of emotion. And I was really glad that I could be there for her and just, have that moment, as, you were just saying, to sit with her with it. And, as we age and gain experience in this subject, unfortunately, I think that we understand that being empathetic is just a lot of times just being present and letting it sit and having that time with our friends. Is it me? You'll have to cut this.
Do you want to go to the Dominic piece?
Yes. Okay. Shifting to some of our personal experiences with death, I clearly remember the first death that had a major life impact for myself and my husband was when Dominic died, and he was my husband's best friend, and he was the best man at our wedding. And God, it chokes me up every time. When he died suddenly, the very first thought I had was, did he know how much I loved him and cared about him? Because I don't ever remember telling him. I mean, every time we were with him, it was like raising our kids and having fun or a party. And when they're gone suddenly, you realize, oh my God, they were so important to me. How did I not tell him how much I loved him and cared about him? So after he died, it became this shift in my life where I really would share with people, I love you. Thank you for being my friend. And you end a lot of phone calls with, I love you, which I never would have done before. But it really made such an impact that I thought, I want people in my life, while I have the ability to share with them how much they mean to me, I want them to know.
That's one of those things when we were younger, I think we naturally did. As middle schoolers, we would write notes, we would write on each other's like peachy folders, draw hearts, I love you.
Peachy folders.
We really were
Yes.
expressive, I think. And I don't think we were unique in that. Maybe we were, but I do feel like over time you lose that. And part of it's the busyness of life. We don't pause and kind of tell people, how much they mean to us. And, and for our listeners, this life lesson for you happened over 20 years ago, right? You were in your early
20
30s.
years this year. Yes.
Yeah, you were in your early 30s, and how many people have benefited. This is also, I think, an important part of this subject is what death can teach those of us that keep on living, right? And do we use those lessons? And it sounds like you definitely, I know I received those kind words and those loving words from you. But I do think too, one of the things we haven't said on the show yet is anything about nicknames. And one of Katie's nicknames is the SB for social butterfly, because she has this tendency to kind of bring people together. And I do feel like as the decades have marched on, you, particularly in our circle of friends, have part of this glue that helps bring us together, especially at times when maybe we've drifted, our lives have kind of taken away. And maybe that's rooted in that experience that you had. I mean, I think you've always had that. The SB nickname goes back a long way.
Yeah, it does. It does.
But I do think that you have been very proactive in making sure that the friends like myself in your life know how much we mean. And one of the things we really want to inspire and encourage our listeners from this episode is to take that time to tell people how you feel, and share with them what they mean in your life. And we hope that you'll reach out to people and make that a practice. We make that just becomes part of how you end a conversation. Or
yes.
It makes me think of the work that I do with people in the leadership coaching that I do. We often talk about recognition and feedback, and the best feedback is specific feedback. So it is awesome to tell somebody that you love them, or you think they're awesome, or you're really glad that they are your friend, but also really telling them specifically what it is that you appreciate about them, what it is that you admire about them, why it is you're grateful that the friendship has endured. So be as specific as you can with people when you do reach out and share those words with them, and don't wait, right? None of us, none of us are guaranteed a tomorrow, ever. And so we got to wake up.
I think, that's one thing that I definitely took away from that experience. And something else that was so touching to me. And we, as a general rule on our podcast, will refrain from using names whenever possible. We want to tell our stories, but we don't want to, include names that, maybe their story doesn't, they don't want to be involved. But if you ever listen to this podcast, Chrissy A., I want you to know how much one action that you took, how much it meant to me. After Dominic died, you don't know, you sometimes don't know when you're the person that's going through the pain, you don't really know what to say, or how people can help you. And Chrissy had loss of her own, pretty intense loss. So she unfortunately knew what to do. And I came home one night and there was a full dinner on our front porch with a beautiful card. I mean, she cooked like this huge chicken and rice dinner and salad and bread and dessert. And it was just there. Like, she didn't wait for me to say, hey, could you do this? She just did it. And also from that day forward, I've learned to do the same thing. You don't wait for people when they're in the middle of this huge tragedy or going through some loss. You just do something for them. They might not even be able to articulate what they need, but that gesture meant so much.
Yeah.
It was heartfelt. And I, to this day, brings me to tears.
Yeah.
Brings me to tears.
Yeah. I think that, that idea of the person suffering may not know what they need. And so sometimes just being a friend is taking the action you think they might need. And it's meeting people where they're at sometimes, right? And so you never know when a small act that you might make can impact somebody, like the story that you just shared. And so it doesn't have to be a grand, huge gesture either, right?
Just that little moment. And I know personally what we are going through with a very dear friend of ours. Another person in our circle is constantly delivering food and doing nice things because she happens to be nearby. Neither of one of us are nearby. And she took food recently, and the food, was enjoyed by the people that are going through this really hard time. And we got the text saying, thank you, we had toast tonight. And just that simple little thing meant so much that we can just make their day a little bit brighter while they're going through a very, very difficult time.
Right. And so, we like to leave you all with that call to action, so to speak, or doing something based on our conversation today. And I know this term ghosting is one we might be familiar with, and we're not talking about the kind where you've gone on a date and you don't want to go on another date, so you just don't respond back, right? But sometimes it's this idea of we're maybe even unintentionally ghosting somebody because maybe they're going through a divorce and they've got this messy situation going on, and without meaning to, we haven't really maybe called them like we normally would or reached out to them because it's messy. And do we want to get in the middle of that? And so just checking yourself and doing the thing that maybe might feel hard for you. I mean, imagine how hard it is for this other person who's actually living the experience, and reach out. And
right. And just avoiding I don't want to bother them.
Right. Yes. Oh my gosh.
I don't want to bother them. Oh, it's, just a little, even a simple text, thinking about you, love you.
Yeah. That would be huge to do something like that. And rather than avoiding it. So feel with them, right? Show that you have that empathy and feel with them.
I want to share one other piece that we can take from the Latin culture. They celebrate Dia De Los Muertos, Day of the Dead, which I know as an American, we might think, oh my gosh, they're celebrating the dead. But, they're celebrating life. They're celebrating at the end of your life. It should be celebrated. And I remember one time looking at the front cover of the newspaper, and it was a limousine, and it was an older lady, and she's out the limousine window with like champagne, and she's like dancing. She was celebrating the life of her husband. And I remember looking at that thinking, oh, that's weird. But now I'm like, no, we all have our moments of grieving, but celebrating and embracing, like, what a great life they had. And look at all the beautiful memories that they created and, the family that they have. So I really just want that also to be a takeaway, that like in these really awful, heavy times, we also celebrate all of the joy that that person brings to us or has brought to our lives.
And sharing their stories. I briefly mentioned the loss of my ex-husband and my son's father. And one of the ways that I try to honor his memory is to share the stories of our life together, of his life before me, with our son, right? That those memories, those stories, and not being afraid when we're with his grandparents, the parents, of his dad, that we talk, that we share stories, that
Sure.
and laughter, that it's okay to, that's part of honoring somebody's life. And I know one of the a saying in the a condolence that I recently heard was, may their life be a blessing, right, to you,
Yes.
right, their
Yes.
life. And so, some of the stories we tell in our show here will be fun and silly and light. And today we told some more serious stories, but all of our stories are meant to inspire the connection between friends and to nurture those relationships in the good times, when you're doing the fun things, and in the difficult times, which we all will experience. And, how we persevere, how we get through difficult times is with the support of our friends and our family. And we hope we've given you some things to think about today, and some actions to take to do that.
Well,
And
I want to just add one piece, a meme or something that I had seen online recently is, don't be afraid to mention the dead if somebody has passed, because mentioning them is going to bring it up. Well, guess what? We all know that they're dead. So let's embrace that time to say, hey, remember that time so-and-so did such and such. I mean, I think it just brings levity and just takes us to a happier place where we realize how much they enriched our lives.
Exactly, exactly. So if we did inspire you today with this episode and you want more, you can find Girls Just Want to Tell Stories where you listen to your favorite podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play. And please subscribe so you'll know when we release new episodes. And we look forward to sharing our stories with the world. Thank you.
Thanks for listening.